The fluorescent lights of Mercy General's emergency department hummed with a frequency that only Alara Vance seemed to hear, a low, electric headache that never went away. At 53, Alara was the invisible woman. To the high-flying residents and the fresh-faced nursing graduates, she was just old Alara. She was the one they assigned to clean up projectile vomit in Bay 4. She was the one who restocked the supply closets while the younger staff flirted near the MRI machines. She wore compression socks and thick-soled shoes, and she walked with a stiff, guarded gait that the staff whispered was arthritis. They were wrong. It wasn't arthritis. It was the result of a botched halo jump landing in the Hindu Kush 20 years ago, where she'd hiked 12 miles on a shattered pelvis to extract a compromised intel asset. But nobody at Mercy General knew that. Vance, for the love of God, pick up the pace. The voice snapped like a whip across the trauma bay. Dr. Marcus Preston, the 33-year-old attending physician, stood over a patient, checking his expensive watch. Preston was the golden boy of the hospital board, Ivy League education, perfectly coiffed hair, and an ego that required its own zip code. He viewed medicine not as a calling, but as a ladder to a political career. "I'm moving as fast as protocol allows, doctor," Alara said, her voice raspy. She was pushing a cart laden with saline bags and gauze. "Protocol," Preston scoffed, turning to the two snickering interns, Brittany and Kyle. "Hear that? The janitor is quoting protocol. Vance, look at you. Your hands are shaking. You're shaking holding a saline bag. Honestly, why haven't you retired? You're a liability." Alara looked down at her hands. There was a microtremor in her left thumb. Nerve damage from shrapnel in Fallujah. It vanished the second she held a weapon or a scalpel, but in the cold air of the ER, it was visible. "The patient in Bay 2 needs a catheter, doctor," Alara said evenly, ignoring the insult. "And his blood pressure is dropping. I suspect internal hemorrhage, not just the concussion you diagnosed." Preston stepped close to her, invading her personal space. He smelled of expensive cologne and arrogance. "I didn't ask for a consult from a nurse who can barely walk without wincing. Go empty the bedpans in geriatrics. Leave the medicine to the people who didn't get their degree from a cereal box." Brittany giggled, covering her mouth. "Dr. Preston, be nice. She's probably just tired. It's past her bedtime." Alara didn't blink. Her eyes, a pale, icy blue, locked onto Preston's. For a split second, the old Alara mask slipped, and something predatory peered out. Preston flinched, instinctively stepping back, though he didn't know why. "I'll check the bedpans," Alara said softly, "but check Bay 2's spleen, or he'll be dead in 10 minutes. She turned and limped away. "Delusional," Preston muttered, loud enough for the whole floor to hear. "If she wasn't union, I'd have fired her yesterday." 10 minutes later, the alarms in Bay 2 screamed. The patient's spleen had ruptured. Preston saved him, barely, but claimed credit for catching the subtle signs during rounds. Alara listened from the hallway, mopping the floor, her face an unreadable mask of stone. She wasn't waiting for an apology. She was waiting for the war to come home. She just didn't know it would arrive that very night. The rain hammered against the ambulance bay doors, a relentless drumbeat that signaled a busy night. Code blues, overdoses, car wrecks. The pit, as they called the ER, was drowning. Then, the red phone at the charge nurse's station rang. The bat phone. It only rang for mass casualty events or high-value targets. Brittany answered it, her face going pale. "Dr. Preston, dispatch says we have a Tier 1 VIP incoming. 5 minutes out. Massive trauma. Security clearance level. Black?" Preston's eyes lit up. This was it. The career maker. "Clear trauma 1. I want everyone who isn't an MD out of the room. Get security to lock down the wing." "Who is the patient?" "They wouldn't say," Brittany stammered. "Just that he's the architect." Alara, stocking gauze in the corner, froze. A box of bandages slipped from her hand. The architect. She hadn't heard that call sign in 15 years. General Silas Kincaid. The man who designed the modern special operations playbook. The man she had pulled out of a burning Black Hawk in Mogadishu when everyone else said he was dead. "Vance!" Preston shouted. "Did you hear me? Clear out. I need space for competent staff. Go guard the waiting room door. Don't let the press in." "He has a metal plate in his right parietal lobe," Alara said, her voice cutting through the noise. "And he's allergic to morphine. It causes anaphylactic shock instantly." Preston spun around. "Excuse me?" "The VIP," Alara said, stepping forward. The limp was less pronounced now. Adrenaline was flooding her system, overriding the pain. "If you give him standard pain management, you will kill him." "How could you possibly know that?" Preston sneered. "Stop making up stories to feel important. Get out." He shoved her toward the door. Alara stumbled but caught herself. She looked at the clock. 2 minutes. "If you kill him, Preston," she whispered, "there won't be a hospital left to fire me from." "Security," Preston yelled. "Escort Nurse Vance to the lobby." 2 burly guards grabbed Alara by the arms. She didn't fight. She let them drag her out, her eyes fixed on the trauma bay doors. She knew what was coming, and she knew Preston wasn't ready. The ambulance screeched into the bay, flanked by 2 black SUVs. Men in tactical gear poured out, weapons raised, scanning the perimeter. They weren't police. They were Ghost Squad Special Activities Division. The paramedics wheeled in a stretcher. On it lay a man in his 60s, his chest a ruin of blood and torn fabric. General Silas Kincaid was gray, gasping for air, clutching a wound in his abdomen. "Status," Preston barked, putting on his best TV doctor face. "Gunshot wound to the abdomen, possible aortic nick," the paramedic shouted. "BP is 60/40. He's crashing. Get a line in," Preston ordered. "Push 10 of morphine for the pain and get him to CT." Alara, standing by the double doors of the waiting room 30 feet away, heard the order. "Morphine." "No," she breathed. She didn't think. She didn't calculate. The programming took over. Alara Vance, the 53-year-old grandmotherly nurse, vanished. In her place was Wraith. She twisted her left arm, breaking the grip of the security guard with a precise pressure point strike to the radial nerve. The guard yelped and dropped to his knees. The second guard reached for his taser, but Alara was already inside his guard. She swept his leg and slammed him into the wall. Gentle enough not to break bones, hard enough to stun. She sprinted. The limp was gone. She moved with the terrifying fluidity of a predator. "Don't push the meds!" she screamed, bursting into Trauma 1. Preston had the syringe in the foreport. "Security. Shoot her if you have to." The tactical team in the corner raised their rifles, confused. A nurse attacking a doctor? Alara didn't stop. She shoulder-checked Kyle, the intern, sending him flying into a cart of instruments. She reached Preston just as his thumb depressed the plunger. She didn't argue. She grabbed Preston's wrist and twisted. There was a sickening pop, the sound of a dislocated thumb. Preston screamed, dropping the syringe. "You crazy bitch!" he howled, clutching his hand. "Arrest her." "He's in anaphylaxis from the pre-meds in the ambulance," Alara shouted, looking at the monitor. "Look at his throat. It's closing. He can't breathe." Sure enough, General Kincaid was thrashing, clutching his throat. His face was turning purple. "It's a tension pneumothorax," Preston yelled, sweating profusely. "He needs a chest tube. You're killing him." "It's laryngeal edema," Alara roared back. She grabbed a stethoscope and slammed it onto Kincaid's chest, listening for half a second. Silent chest. No air movement. "We have 10 seconds before brain death." "Get away from him." Preston lunged at her with his good hand. Alara didn't even look at him. She backhanded him across the face. A solid, tactical strike that sent the arrogant doctor sprawling across the floor. "Scalpel," she commanded. Brittany, the nurse, was frozen in terror. I can't." Alara grabbed a crash kit, ripped it open and found a number 10 blade. She looked down at the general. His eyes were rolling back. "Sorry, see?" she whispered. "This is going to hurt." She didn't prep the skin. She didn't wait for anesthesia. She palpitated the cricothyroid membrane in his neck, a tiny divot of cartilage. With steady hands that were essentially rock solid now, she plunged the scalpel into his throat. Blood spurted onto her face. Preston shrieked from the floor. "She's murdering him. Shoot her." The lead commando raised his rifle, aiming at Alara's head. "Ma'am, step away from the general. If I stop, he dies." Alara growled, not looking up. She twisted the blade, creating an airway, and jammed the barrel of a pen casing, which she had dismantled in 1 second, into the hole. A harsh, whistling sound filled the room, the sound of air rushing into starving lungs. Kincaid's chest heaved. The purple hue began to fade. The monitor, which had been flatlining, began to beep. Beep, beep, beep. Alara grabbed an ambu bag and attached it to the makeshift airway, squeezing rhythmically. "AP pen. Now." Brittany, shaking, handed it to her. Alara stabbed it into the general's thigh. Kincaid's eyes fluttered open. He looked around wildly, panic in his gaze, until he locked eyes with the woman covered in his blood, wearing a stained nurse's uniform. He blinked. Then he tried to speak. He couldn't because of the tube, but he reached up with a trembling hand. He tapped 3 times on Alara's arm. Tap, tap, tap. The universal signal for all clear. Alara exhaled, her shoulders slumping. She looked at the lead commando, who still had a gun pointed at her head. "He's stable," she said calmly. "You can lower your weapon, Sergeant. Unless you plan to shoot the medic who just saved your boss." The room was silent, save for the rhythmic beeping of the monitor and Preston's whimpering. "You're finished, Vance?" Preston hissed, climbing to his feet, cradling his broken thumb. "Assault. Attempted murder. Practicing medicine without a license. I will see you in prison for the rest of your miserable life." Alara wiped the blood from her cheek. "Do what you have to do, doctor." The hospital boardroom was an intimidating space of mahogany and glass, overlooking the city skyline. But for Alara, it was just another interrogation room. She sat at the end of the long table, still in her blood-spattered scrubs. Across from her sat the hospital director, a timid man named Henderson, the head of HR, a woman who looked like she sucked lemons for a living, and Dr. Preston, whose hand was now in a cast. "This is an open-and-shut case," Preston was saying, slamming his good hand on the table. "She assaulted an attending physician. She performed an unauthorized, barbaric surgical procedure in a non-sterile environment. She endangered a VIP. The fact that he survived is luck, pure and simple. I want her license revoked. I want criminal charges pressed immediately." Henderson sighed, looking at Alara. "Ms. Vance, do you have anything to say? Any defense?" Alara looked at her hands. The tremor was back, slight but there. "I acted to save a life. Dr. Preston misdiagnosed the patient. Morphine would have killed him." "That is a lie," Preston shouted. "I am the chief resident. You are a nurse who changes bedpans. You think you know more than me?" "Yes," Alara said simply. "The arrogance." Preston laughed, a manic sound. "You're a sad old woman who watched too many medical dramas. You're fired. Effective immediately. Security is waiting to escort you off the premises." The HR director slid a paper across the table. "Sign this, admitting guilt, and we might convince Dr. Preston not to sue you for the assault." Alara looked at the paper. It was a confession. It would destroy her pension, her reputation, her life. She picked up the pen. She had no money for a lawyer. She had no family to fight for her. She was just tired. Thud, thud, thud. The sound came from the roof. It wasn't the wind. It was the rhythmic beat of heavy rotors. "What is that?" Henderson asked, nervously adjusting his glasses. The boardroom doors didn't open. They exploded inward. 2 flashbang grenades rolled into the room. Bang! A blinding light filled the space, followed by the shattering of the high-rise windows as ropes dropped from the roof. Men in black tactical gear rappelled into the room, boots hitting the mahogany table. Lasers swept across the faces of the terrified board members. "Hands! Let me see your hands!" the operators screamed. Preston shrieked and hid under the table. Henderson wet himself. Through the shattered doors walked a man in a wheelchair, pushed by the sergeant from the ER. General Kincaid looked pale, a bandage around his neck, but his eyes were burning with a cold, hard fire. Behind him walked a four-star general, General Marcus Thorne, no relation to the doctor, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs. "What is the meaning of this?" Henderson squeaked. "This is a hospital." General Thorne ignored him. He walked straight to Alara, who was sitting calmly amidst the chaos, the pen still in her hand. Thorne stopped. He looked at Alara's tired face, the gray hair, the cheap shoes. Then the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff snapped to attention. "Major Vance," Thorne barked. The soldiers in the room, 12 Tier 1 operators, simultaneously slammed their heels together and saluted. Alara slowly stood up. The tremor in her hand stopped. She straightened her back, shedding 20 years of age in a single motion. She returned the salute, crisp and perfect. "General," she said. "Major." Preston's voice came from under the table. He crawled out looking confused. She's a nurse, an LPN." General Kincaid wheeled himself forward. His voice was a raspy whisper, amplified by a throat mic. "Dr. Preston," Kincaid said, "you were about to fire the woman who just saved my life? She assaulted me. She performed a tracheotomy without authorization." Preston stammered. "She performed a battlefield cricothyrotomy," Kincaid corrected. "A procedure she invented in 2004 during the siege of Fallujah. It's in the field manual. I assume you haven't read it." "Invented?" Preston went pale. General Thorne threw a thick file onto the table. It slid across and hit Preston in the chest. "Alara Wraithvance," Thorne read aloud. "Distinguished Service Cross. 2 silver stars. 3 purple hearts. Former lead medic for Delta Force. The only person in history to perform open-heart surgery in the back of a moving little bird helicopter while under RPG fire." The room went deadly silent. "She retired," Thorne continued, glaring at the board members, "because she sustained nerve damage dragging 3 men, including me, out of a collapsed bunker. That tremor you mocked. Doctor, that's the price of your freedom." Preston looked at Alara. He looked at the janitor he had ridiculed for 3 years. He felt the world tilting beneath his feet. I didn't know," Preston whispered. "Ignorance is not a defense, Doctor," Kincaid rasped. "You care about titles? Fine. Major Vance outranks everyone in this room. And as of this morning, she has been reactivated as my personal medical liaison." Alara looked at Kincaid. "Reactivated? Silas, I'm retired." "Not anymore," Kincaid said, his expression grim. "Because the bullet they pulled out of me? It wasn't a stray round. It was a sniper shot. And it was tipped with a binary poison. Polonium-210. Alara's eyes widened. "Someone tried to assassinate me, Alara," Kincaid said. "And they know I'm here. We're not safe. The hospital is compromised." As if on cue, the lights in the boardroom died. The emergency red lights flickered on. "They're here," the lead sergeant shouted. "Hostiles in the building. Secure the exits." Sergeant Miller barked. "No," Alara said, her voice cutting through the panic. "They'll have the exits rigged. If they're professional enough to use polonium, they're professional enough to breach a hospital lockdown." She looked at Preston. "Doctor, give me your ID badge." "What? Why?" "Because your clearance gets us into the subbasement morgue elevator. It's the only unmonitored exit." Preston hesitated. Alara didn't. She grabbed his badge from his coat. "General Thorne, get the board members down. Keep their heads low. Silas, you're with me." "I can't walk," Kincaid grunted. "Then you ride," Alara said. She grabbed the handles of his wheelchair. "Miller, Give me your sidearm. Major, that's against regs. Miller started, but seeing the look in her eyes, he handed over his Sig Sauer P226. Alara checked the chamber. Loaded. Safety off. She held the gun with a steady two-handed grip. The tremor was gone. Let's move. They burst out of the boardroom into the hallway. The hospital was in chaos. Alarms blared. Smoke was filling the corridor. Canisters thrown by the assassins to create confusion. Through the smoke, 3 figures emerged. They wore hospital scrubs, but they moved like soldiers. They carried suppressed submachine guns. Contact front. Miller yelled, opening fire. The hallway erupted in gunfire. Bullets shredded the drywall. The board members screamed and dove for cover. Alara pushed the wheelchair hard, sprinting toward the service elevator. Covering fire. One of the assassins flanked them, raising his weapon toward Kincaid. Alara didn't break stride. She raised the pistol and fired 2 shots. Double tap. Center mass. The assassin dropped. Preston, running behind them, stared in horror. The old woman, who cleaned vomit, was now executing a running gunfight with the precision of a machine. The elevator is dead, Alara shouted, hitting the button. They cut the power to the lifts. Stairs? Kincaid asked. Too exposed, Alara said. She looked at a nearby door. MRI Suite 3. In here. She kicked the door open and shoved the wheelchair inside. Preston and 2 of the soldiers followed. She slammed the door and locked it. This is a dead end. Preston panicked. We're trapped. Shut up, Alara ordered. She looked at the massive MRI machine. Is this magnet superconducting? Yes. It's a 3 Tesla magnet. It's always on, Preston yelled. What does that matter? Alara looked at the door. The assassins were pounding on it. They would breach in seconds. Miller, Alara said to the soldier. Give me your vest. And your helmet. Put all your metal weapons on the floor in the corner. Now. Major. Do it. Alara stripped the tactical vest off the soldier and draped it over Kincaid's head and chest. Silas, stay down. Preston, get behind the console in the control room. It's shielded. What are you doing? Physics, Alara said grimly. She grabbed a metal oxygen tank from the wall, a heavy steel cylinder. She placed it on a rolling cart directly in front of the door. Then she ran to the control room, shattered the glass with the butt of the gun, and dove inside just as the door to the suite blew open. 4 assassins stormed in, weapons raised. They were clad in body armor, carrying steel rifles. Alara hit the quench button, the emergency release that vented the helium, but she also hit the magnetic gradient override. But before the quench, the magnet was still fully active. The assassins stepped into the magnetic field. The laws of physics took over. The steel oxygen tank Alara had placed on the cart didn't just roll. It became a missile. Pulled by the invisible, terrified force of the 3 Tesla magnet, it flew across the room at 100 miles per hour. It smashed into the lead assassin, crushing his chest instantly. But that wasn't the worst part. The assassins' rifles were steel. The magnet ripped the guns from their hands. One assassin was dragged bodily through the air, his vest buckles slamming him against the machine with the force of a car crash. Now! Alara screamed. She stepped out of the shielded control room, pistol raised. The surviving 2 assassins were disoriented, unarmed, and stuck to the machine or the floor by their own gear. Alara didn't hesitate. Bang, bang. Silence returned to the room, broken only by the hissing of venting helium. Preston slowly stood up in the control booth. He looked at the carnage. He looked at Alara, who was checking Kincaid for injuries. You weaponized an MRI, Preston whispered. I improvised, Alara said. Let's go. The sub-basement is this way. They reached the boiler room in the basement. The air was thick and hot. Stop, Kincaid said, wheezing. Alara, I need the drive. What drive? The reason they want me dead, Kincaid said, pulling a bloody USB stick from his sock. Vanguard Defense. The contractor supplying our troops in Syria. Alara froze. Vanguard? That's Elias Vane's company. Vane isn't just selling weapons, Kincaid coughed. He's selling biological agents to the insurgents. He's creating the threat so he can sell the cure to the Pentagon. A perpetual war machine. That's why the polonium, Alara realized. It sends a message. Vane is on the hospital board, Preston interrupted, his voice shaking. He was at the fundraiser last night. He donated the new trauma wing. He's here, Alara said, realizing the truth. He's in the building. He's watching this. She grabbed the radio from the dead assassin's vest. She keyed the mic. Elias Vane, she said into the channel. This is Major Vance. Static crackled. Then, a smooth, cultured voice answered. Ms. Vance. Or should I say, the janitor? You've caused me a great deal of money tonight. I'm coming for you, Alara said. I have 50 men surrounding the building. Vane laughed. You have a cripple, a terrified doctor, and a handgun with... What, 4 rounds left? Do the math, Major. Send Kincaid out, and I might let you live to clean toilets again. Alara looked at Preston. The arrogant doctor looked broken. Preston, she said softly. You wanted to be a hero, right? You wanted the glory. Preston looked up. I just wanted to be respected. Respect is earned, Alara said. Earn it. Can you get the PA system working from the maintenance panel? Preston looked at the nest of wires on the wall. I think so. It's a standard relay. Good. Hook it up to the radio. Why? Because, Alara smiled. A cold, wolfish smile. I'm not going to call the police. I'm going to call the cavalry. Preston worked the wires. Static whined over the hospital loudspeakers throughout the entire building. Floors 1 through 20. Ready, Preston said. Alara keyed the mic. Her voice boomed through the hospital, echoing in the lobby, the ER, the waiting rooms. This is Major Alara Vance, issuing a distress call. Broken Arrow. I repeat, Broken Arrow at Mercy General. We have foreign hostiles executing American soldiers on U.S. soil. Any active or retired service members in the vicinity request immediate assistance. The enemy is Vanguard Defense mercenaries. They are killing patients. She released the button. Do you think anyone heard? Preston asked. We're in downtown Chicago, Alara said, checking her magazine. There's a VFW bar 2 blocks away. And the ER waiting room? Half of those riffraff you despise are veterans waiting for care. 2 minutes later, the sounds of battle changed. Outside the hospital, a pickup truck smashed through the barricades set up by Vane's men. An old man with a tire iron jumped out. Then another. Then a group of men from the waiting room, one with a cane, one with a prosthetic leg, tackled the mercenaries in the lobby. It wasn't a tactical squad. It was a mob of angry old men who remembered their oaths. The distraction works, Alara said. Let's finish this. She left Kincaid with Miller and dragged Preston toward the elevators. Where are we going? Preston cried. The roof. No, Alara said. The penthouse office. Vane is watching from the high ground. That's where a commander sits. They kicked open the doors to the director's office on the top floor. Elias Vane stood by the window, a glass of scotch in his hand, watching the chaos below. 2 massive bodyguards stood by his side. Impressive. Vane turned, smiling. You rallied the peasants. But it changes nothing. The police are bought. The narrative is already written. Disgruntled nurse goes on shooting spree. He nodded to his bodyguards. Kill them. The guards drew their weapons. Alara moved. She didn't shoot. She was out of bullets. She threw the empty gun at the first guard's face, distracting him. She slid across the polished floor, kicking the knee of the second guard, shattering the joint. As he fell, she grabbed his own knife from his belt and drove it into his shoulder, pinning him to the floor. The first guard recovered and swung a heavy baton. Alara ducked, the wind of the swing ruffling her hair. She punched him in the throat, a strike that collapsed his trachea. Took 6 seconds. Both guards were down. Alara stood up, breathing hard. her hand steady. She looked at Vane. Vane backed up, his confidence shattering. He pulled a small pistol from his jacket. "Stay back!" he screamed. Alara walked toward him. She didn't run. She walked with the inevitable, terrifying slowness of a nightmare. "You called me a janitor," Alara said. Vane fired. The bullet grazed Alara's arm. She didn't flinch. She reached him, grabbed the gun barrel, and twisted it out of his hand. She grabbed him by the lapels of his expensive Italian suit and slammed him against the glass window. "You're right," Alara whispered, her face inches from his. "I am a janitor. I clean up trash." She didn't kill him. She swept his legs, pinned him to the ground, and zip-tied his hands with a plastic cuff she pulled from her pocket. The door burst open. General Thorne and a fresh squad of FBI agents stormed in. "Secure him," Thorne ordered. Alara stood up, stepping away from the whimpering billionaire. She walked over to the window and looked down. The flashing lights of 100 police cars surrounded the building. The battle was over. Preston stood in the doorway, staring at her. He looked at the unconscious bodyguards, then at Alara. "Who are you?" he asked, genuinely this time. Alara smoothed her scrubs. She adjusted her name tag, which hung crookedly. "I'm the head nurse," she said. "And you're late for rounds, doctor." 3 weeks later, the scandal had rocked the nation. Elias Vane was facing treason charges. General Kincaid was recovering at Walter Reed. Mercy General Hospital was quiet. Dr. Preston stood at the nurses' station. He was no longer the chief resident. He had been demoted to junior attending pending a review of his conduct. He looked humble. He looked tired. The elevator doors opened. Alara Vance walked in. She wasn't wearing scrubs. She wore a tailored navy blue suit. She didn't limp. She used a sleek, black cane with a silver handle shaped like a wolf's head. The entire ER went silent. The snickering interns, Brittany and Kyle, looked at their feet. Alara walked to the center of the room. She placed a file on the counter. "Morning," she said. Preston swallowed hard. "Major Vance. We didn't expect you back. I assumed you'd be taking a position at the Pentagon." "I was offered one," Alara said. "Advisor to the Joint Chiefs. Triple the pay. Nice office. Why didn't you take it?" Alara looked around the ER. She saw a terrified young father holding a sick baby. She saw an addict screaming in Bay 3. She saw the blood, the vomit, the chaos. "Because generals send people to die," Alara said quietly. "Here, I get to help them live." She picked up a clipboard. She looked at Brittany. "Nurse," Alara said sharply. "Bay 4 needs to be prepped for a cardiac arrest incoming. You have 2 minutes. Move." Brittany jumped. "Yes, ma'am." Alara turned to Preston. He flinched, expecting an insult. "Dr. Preston," she said. "Your tie is crooked." Preston blinked. He straightened it. "Thank you, Major." "Don't call me Major," Alara said. A small, genuine smile touching her lips for the first time in years. "Call me Alara. Now, let's get to work." She turned and walked toward the trauma bay, her cane tapping a steady, rhythmic beat on the linoleum floor. The queen of the pit had returned to her throne. And this time, nobody mistook the silence for weakness.